Okay, so I'm Gwen Foster, and I work a lot with hormone issues with people for all ages, actually. And there's some misconceptions about hormones that I actually want to share tonight from also an emotional standpoint. And there's a lot of confusion about hormone balancing. And, there's a lot of reasons our hormones get out of balance, which you'll see as we go through the presentation. So I just want to go ahead and get started now, right away. Like I said, you're going to want to have a notepad or something that you can make tally marks on, because we're going to be talking about andric versus genic. And this is just like a picture out of the book. Most of this information in the beginning of the slide is coming from Who Makes Your Hormones Hum by Hal Huggins. And at the end of the presentation, you'll see the references. So if you want to get any of the books or references, feel more than free. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a list of symptoms, and it's quite an extensive list. And my thanks to my assistant Morgan, who's here right now helping me, that putting this list together out of the book. But this is super important in understanding what personality type you are, but it's also important in understanding you and your relationships. For instance, a lot of people kind of know this, but if you have two testosterone dominant people in one household, it is usually not good. It's there's only one alpha in a tribe or a herd, and if you are, dealing, if you're dealing, my thing is very touchy here, if you're dealing with these clashing personalities, then, it can be long-term problems and a lot of fighting and a lot of, ruling the roost. Fran has her hand up. Fran, you have your hand up. I'll go to questions towards the end of the presentation. I want to check in with one person I know is on webinars with me all the time and just make sure you guys can hear me okay. Guli, can you hear me okay?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can. I just want to make sure everything's fine. Okay, thanks. Okay, so at the end of the presentation, just so you know, I will take live questions, and at that time, if you want to raise your hand or type something in the chat, I'll see it, I'll read your question, and then I'll answer your question. Or if you want to ask a question and you have a microphone or you're on the telephone, then you can just put click on the little hand option that's next to your name, and you'll be able to see, or I'll see your hand up, and then I can ask you the question. Okay, so if you guys haven't been on a webinar with me before, I kind of forget that some people don't do this regularly. I do these every Thursday night. So, okay, so also the thing about andric versus genic is the more andric you are, it's like there's an extreme. There's like a neutral, which would mean you would have equivalent items on the andric and genic list, meaning you'd have 50% andric answers and 50% genic answers, and you'd be a very balanced individual. But let's say your partner is, 100% andric or 100% genic, then there could be some challenges there. But if you had two genics or two andrics, this can be challenging in other ways. So there's always challenges. It's just kind of knowing what your challenges are. And also there's, I know this happens with me and my friends that are my same age, is that, how you see two people and they, they're together 50 years and they seem to do great together, and you're kind of observing the relationship from afar, and maybe you have your own opinion of the relationship. Maybe you think that, the one person's like a doormat and the other one's too dominant, or you think of your best friend's husband and you go, oh my God, I can't stand that guy. It's probably because you're a lot like him, or you're the same personality more than your best friend is, because they might be in perfect percentage ratios to each other hormonally, and they make it work. But then if you clash, it's generally because you're actually the same. And a lot of people don't like that answer, but that's what happens, is that you're the same. It's also, you'll see this in not just in your relationships with spouse or partner, but this could be, a person and a coach or a teacher, or, like family members and all that. So this is not just your relationships with the opposite sex. This is with relationships with anybody, and how this is going to go and get along. There's also in business, what type personality is most likely the manager or the owner of the company or the boss, and what type is the worker bee and the person who can work on an assembly line or in a factory. I mean, it takes a certain personality to be able to do that and do that day in and day out. I know in China they actually have like very extensive personality testing even for factory workers, because they don't want a person in the factory raising a bunch of gossip and drama and stuff for the people who are very content there. They do not want that at all, and so they go through extensive personality testing to make sure that doesn't happen. So anyway, we're going to get started, and on this section, like I said, what I want you to do, hopefully you have a notepad by now, what we're going to do is whenever you see something that describes you in either column, I'd recommend you put andric on the left and genic on the right. This is going to go throughout the first presentation, and whenever we get to one side or the other that just generally describes you more than the other one, you're going to put a tally mark. Okay, you're not going to be all of one, most likely. You're going to be a little of both, but we want to see which one you are, and then we're going to determine what ratio, what percentage. Okay, the first one you may not know actually yet. You're going to learn through this presentation, but you're the testosterone dominant or estrogen dominant. And depending on which one you are, it means andric or genic. So most men are testosterone dominant, but not all of them. Okay, if you have a dominant personality, most likely andric, passive, genic. So you kind of know if you're passive or dominant. Andrics are never in doubt of their opinion being correct, and genics are more the ones to take advice and follow it to the letter. So they're going to be good with instructions. Andrics can tend to be abrasive. Genics are conciliatory. So they're trying to get along with people. Andrics don't care if they get along with people. Andrics tend to be risk takers. And genics are conservative. If you tend to take risks, you're andric. If you generally do not take risk in anything, you would be genic. Andrics do it now, like spontaneous. Genics plan ahead. They're better at making plans. And then we'll go to the next slide. Here's just a picture that came out of Hal Hogan's book. The andrics tend to own the business, and the genics are generally elected to a board or to a council, and they're very, popular. People like them because they're not like in your face. So that's another one you have to choose between. Do you tend to be like the owner of the business, or are you popular? Andrics tend to be loners. Genics are team players. Andrics show them how, if you show them how to do something visually, monkey see, monkey do, they learn by trial and error or observation. Genics, you tell them how to do something and they can probably visualize and accomplish it. Those are not that distinguishably different, really. Andrics more likely not to read the instructions first and just start to build. That's definitely me in that case. I find instructions when something doesn't go together. Does not mind if the final product does not look like the picture on the box. There could be leftover parts, and they don't care. They're not trying to find the leftover parts. Genics are more likely to read the instructions first before building and will not stop until it looks identical to the picture on the box. This so well describes a friend of mine, that, if she lay out all the pieces and make little nice piles and be very organized and have the right tools before she even starts. And andric would most likely, start the project and then run to Home Depot to get what they need after they realize they don't have it. Andrics are yes or no, cut and dry. Genics maybe so. Andrics are instantaneous or spontaneous. Genics are analytical and organized. Something on the yes, no, and maybe so I want to also add to this that's more information is in the book is the andrics, when it comes to yes, no, if you're ever trying to sell something to somebody, this also helps to know if they're andric or genic, because andrics want to know the bottom line. They don't want all the history of a company and da-da-da-da-da. They want to know what's they going to do for me in the price. And they want to make a decision in like 5 minutes. The genics want all the research and paper and history, and then they want to go think about it, and then they want to come back and they want to make a decision and maybe even talk to a few people and get their opinions first. Andrics like direct question and answers. Genics get defensive when questioned. This is a big one in couples. If you're with someone that always gets defensive no matter what you ask them, then they're probably genic. So that's one that you can really identify with. Andrics don't generally feel the necessity of explaining their actions. They make decisions and act on them, and they're not necessarily trying to get everyone's approval. Genics think in terms of total explanations. There are reasons why things are the way they are. They're gonna get an opinion. They're gonna call 5 girlfriends and discuss their purchase that day. It's that kind of thing. Andrics are not gonna say they went and bought a new car. They just went and bought a new car because they felt like it, and a genic would never do that. Andrics are instant decision makers based more on gut reactions than analytical decisions. Genics are laid back and analytical and make decisions by thinking over all the facts and evaluating them. Andrics tend to be sympathetic dominant. which is more like, fight or flight. Gen-X tend to be parasympathetic dominant. Androics are considered type A personality or type A behavior. People know what type A is. They're driven. Gen-X are more like laid back, non-volatile, and thoughtful, more type B personalities. Androics are interested in instant gratification, and like Velcro is a funny example. Gen-X are patient. They're okay to put on a dress that has 35 buttons on it. So, they're okay with detail. They're okay with something that would be considered cumbersome to an androic. Androics shop for convenience and will buy something just because they like it, even if they have nothing to go with it. They just like this one belt or this one shirt. They're not thinking ahead. They're not thinking about what they're going to wear it with. They just purchase it impulsively. Gen-X do comparison shopping with quality and most carefully interwoven, materials. Will buy something with the complete outfit in mind, not just one piece. What Gen-X will do is, they're using their cell phone while they're shopping. They're doing price comparisons. They're looking at the tag. They're looking if somewhere has it cheaper. They're, basically, it's not impulsive at all, and they have their whole wardrobe in mind. Androics verbally can tend to be abrasive or sarcastic. Gen-X verbally, they tend to be peacemakers looking for mid-ground. They do not mind taking a few more minutes or even hours to discuss something if the outcome is peaceful. We all know people in both of these personality types. Androics tend to be creative risk takers, especially about their own ideas, like entrepreneur type. Gen-X tend to be investors, so they don't like being out on a limb. They like to live by the book. Comfort to them is the security of repetition because it's more predictive. Androics like the sensuous. They like the feel of cashmere, chinchilla, the taste of fine wines. They would not drink a wine they do not care for, despite who the hostess is. So they're not doing something because of what people think. They're doing it if they like it or not. Gen-X know how to say the polite things to the hostess. They're the ones to bring the small gifts, and they see to it that notes of appreciation are sent after the party. This is so funny to me. I'm thinking of this one friend of mine that she's very Gen-X for sure, but it's like she's very judgmental about these little processes. Like everyone should do this. It's just automatic, and it's not. It's a personality trait. It's not that you can't learn to do some of these things on either side, but it's not in your nature, let's say. Androics may be emotionally high-strung and aggressive, but not brutal. Gen-X can control their external emotions and are highly complex emotional individuals. Androics are more apt to cry at movies, to choke up on emotional stories. Although active and controlled during emotional crisis when they occur, they may cry on recounting the adventure. So they can hold it together during a crisis, but they're going to, and they're not emotionless, let's say. Gen-X, it says, can be the minister at a funeral of the relative or a good friend and speak in a controlled voice that does not get choked up over the emotion of the moment. So they both can kind of keep their emotions in check when they need to, but Gen-X are better at it in something like a funeral. Androics in meeting are guaranteed to interrupt. So they're going to interrupt a conversation. They're not going to let someone else finish. Gen-X rarely do this. They rarely step on toes or interrupt. They'll patiently wait until the other person finishes talking. Androics in a work environment, they tend to be happiest where protocol is not as important as being able to instantly evaluate a situation and create evasive maneuvers to correct the problem before it gets out of hand. Gen-X are thinkers and planners, evaluators of the long-term significance of their decisions. Protocol is a must. A pecking order of responsibility is super important for the Gen-X, for it assigns responsibility and leadership and determines who is in charge. So this is important because if you think about development teams or research teams or R&D teams or offices, where you have like, a few managers and then you have all the subordinate workers, they have to be Gen-X, because if they're not, it's going to buck the system. It's going to make, they're going to be vying and jealous and have issues and competitive. It's not going to work out if you have too many androics or any androics in that position. Androics are going by the book does not work for them. They don't care what the book says. Gen-X are into detail and going by the book. They're more likely going to follow the speed limit. They're more likely going to do things because you're supposed to do something a certain way. Androics will tend to buck the system. They'll tend to, it's not like they want to. It's not like they're trying to wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to do something unusual or different today. It's just who they are. It's just a personality type. Androics come up with good ideas and are strong starters. They usually want action today, but just short of the finish line, they lose interest or they get bored. When they see the goal is achievable, they start looking for the excitement of another new project. Genics make great support players. After the enthusiasm of the andric rubs off on the genic, they become focused on the finish and can be counted on to tend to all the details and follow through so that the company can break the ribbon and win the race. That's why it's so important to have genics in the workforce to get these projects done. Like a good andric job personality would be like in outside sales. You know, it's a short-term process generally, but then you have the support in the office that's a genic. Or let's say like an insurance, you'd have the people in the insurance office would be genics, the people making the sales calls and the managers would be andric in a good situation. Andrics in business, they're at the bottom, they only care about the bottom line only. They go for the gold, they go all the way or go home kind of people. So they're competitive. In business, genics, they know that nothing is as simple as going from point A to B in a straight line. They're natural negotiators. Andrics, one problem they have in business is they trust people on their own personal evaluation, and they're comfortable with doing large business deals on just a handshake. Genics are good at forming business strategies. They tend to look suspiciously at everyone in business, and they're apt to say, prove it, show me the money, show me the data. But they're also going to be the ones that want a contract. They want to review the terms. They're not going to make a decision on a handkerchief or on a napkin at, at a restaurant. Andrics make decisions based on overviews and general assessments. Genics make decisions based on in-depth information and data. Andrics do well on short-term projects that require lots of intense, focused input and dedication for a few months. A few weeks would even be better. Genics can be in it for the long haul. They're the ones that invented the self-evaluation forms that include your 1-year, 5-year, and 10-year plans. Andrics will leap towards anything because of a gut reaction, very impulsive. Genics are all for safe corporate investments. They're not going to do anything that's a risk. If you go back to this one for a minute, like this would even be like safe investments, money market, CDs, stuff like that. Fixed accounts would be more of a genic approach to investing. Andrics would be more the aggressive growth accounts or foreign growth accounts, something like that would scare genics. They would make them not sleep at night. And andrics, it says it's the final result that counts. How you get there is inconsequential. Genics more interested in protocol. Was everything done correctly? This reminds me of like watching some of the TV shows where you have like a prosecutor. I'm thinking of Blue Bloods and that lady that's the daughter of Tom Selleck, and she's always about, did you do it correctly? Did you get everything done? Did you did you get the warrant? Did you do this? And her brother, who's the detective, doesn't do anything by the book. In fact, he tries not to be by the book. That's a classic example. Like you can think of even TV shows where the detective brother is andric and the sister is very genic, and how they clash, but how at the end it always comes out in both of their favors. That's like if you watch that show, that's a good example. On andrics, they don't like to balance their own checkbooks, but somehow they have an uncanny sense of how much is in their account. Genics make great accountants because they make sure everything is perfectly right on those balance sheets. Andrics, if they go to the counselor cannot get a logical response as to what made the andric do what they did. The andric just did. He did not plan the event, he just did it. So there's no logical processing. And this can be very frustrating between genics and andrics. When genics need an explanation, or why'd you do something, or why'd you not do something, and andrics don't have an answer. It's not that there's an excuse. They really did not think the whole thing through. They just did something. This is going to happen with teenagers, or you know what that is. And then the genics, if they go to the council, the conversation be quite long and organized. The problem can be logically analyzed by an outsider, and the solutions will become obvious. A logical set of new patterns can be suggested, and the case will have a high potential for success. This is a person, it might take a genic 3 or 4 counselor appointments even to get to the point, because they're going to go from their birth until the issue at hand and give every detail. An andric would not do that. An andric's like, I don't even know why I'm here, and I don't know why I did what I did, I just did it. That's kind of the difference, but you can see how that can be frustrating between personalities. On andrics, the feelings to them are physical things, the things that are handled by an aspirin. So you take something if you have a certain feeling you don't like. For genics, feelings to them are emotions, they're language barriers. They can create blocks and barriers. Andrics, in an assembly line, they will try to find ways of improving the system, and if that fails, they'll go on to something that brings a new challenge every day. Genix in an assembly line, they can do repetitive operations with competence and feel satisfaction with the outcome in terms of numbers, like in production. That's why you don't want an andric on an assembly line in a fixed environment. They're going to try to change it. Andrics tend to be secure about anything they tackle. If they are not secure, they avoid the subject entirely. Genix tend to be the insecure wallflower at a party. They are highly security-oriented. Strong andrics are apt to be agitators. You know, they're the ones that are going to dig and hit your hot button and do it, just basically be irritating. Strong Genix are apt to be conciliatory because they want to make peace, but they also sometimes want to make peace to the point of their own demise. Like, they'll avoid confrontation at all costs, even if it means like no communication or lack of communication. They're generally good communicators, but not if there's a perceived argument or distrust or something like that. Then they'll avoid it like the plague. Andrics look at compromise as everybody lost something and won't hesitate to tell anyone that. Genix are into compromise and letting everybody win something. So andrics don't like compromise, and Genix only like compromise. And when I was going this other one, it made me think of something else about the agitators versus the peacemakers. Is this is when you're talking about andric, you're generally talking about testosterone dominance, and Genix is estrogen dominance. That's what it said in the very beginning. So when you're talking about people who like don't want to discuss and don't want to go into detail, and they don't know why they did something, you're looking at, you know, any references that are old, like Men Are From Mars and all that stuff, where, you know, guys don't want to, they want the bottom line. They want you to tell them what you need or what they can do, and they don't want 3 hours of discussion about it. So there's a lot of women that are andric and men that are genic. You're going to find this through this whole conversation, hopefully. And in gay couples, one is one of these and one is the other, generally more than the other. And so even in all kinds of personalities that go together, you're going to still have andric versus genic. When andrics vacation, they're likely to be spontaneous. When genics vacation, they're likely to make an itinerary for the whole trip down to the hour. Andrics invented the on-off switch. Genics invented the dimmer switch. Andrics love change. Genics love tradition. Andrics organization is not their forte. Genics have a place for everything, and everything has its place. Andrics like fast food and fast service. Genics like to take the time to read the menu, ask the waiter about the different lettuces in the salad, you know, what are the specials. They're going to take their time and enjoy the experience. Having to do with tradition and change, I want to give another example there. Is like, you know, a genic would want every year to be Christmas at a certain place with the same decorations and nothing, and the same dinner menu, where the andric would say, hey, let's go on a cruise this year, and maybe say that the week before Christmas, which would drive the genic crazy, because they're not going to want to do that, because they're, well, what would the kids think? Well, what about the neighbors? Well, what about this and that? And that's where you can come into like a problem with the personality types. Andrics do well on a lot of meat. There's supposed to be lots of meat. Genics do not do well on lots of meats. They feel bloated after eating a large steak. Andrics feel a drop of energy within 1 or 2 days of abstaining from animal protein. Genics can become vegetarians and function very well. Andrics make great cooks, care more how it tastes, not how it looks. Like off the grill, they're really going to have a great meal, but it's not going to be the big presentation with all the side stuff. So Genics is going to make a great chef. Creative and presentation is important. Andrics like to look nice, but keep it simple in the aspect of clothing. Genics are generally into current fashion, or apt to be neat freaks. So even though andrics like to look nice, they're not going to be looking at fashion magazines and what's in and out of season and changing their closet for the seasons and getting rid of, you know, or updating their closet, let's say. Andrics like individual sports, solo is best. Genics like team sports, like doing things together. This can be important, like if you have kids and your kids are either andric or genic, because it might help. You know, they may not do good in team sports. They may not do good in baseball or football if they're andric. They might do better in tennis or martial arts or something like that. So that's another good, nice thing to know. Andrics, it says birth control pills or other estrogen product balances out their blood chemistry and emotional state. What that means is andrics have too much testosterone. So if you're a female and you're andric and you took birth control pills, it would actually balance you out and balance your blood chemistry and make you feel better. So with an andric taking birth control pills, they generally feel better. If a genic took birth control pills, it's more likely to cause, cancer because of the estrogen dominance and other estrogen dominance issues, which you'll see later in this presentation. So these two are important to remember. If someone felt good after taking birth control pills and it seemed to normalize them, they're probably andric. If they started having other health issues due to taking the pill, like endometriosis or fibroids or complications or mood disorders, they're probably genic. That's what that means. Andrics would probably speed through a yellow light. Genics would slow down and stop for a yellow light. Andrics like to yell a lot, maybe not so much as in decibels as in being vocal about their opinion to make themselves heard. Genics will sit back and think about how to resolve the situation without the physical violence that's suggested by the andric. Andric's going to be like kind of in your face. Not necessarily they're physically abusive, but they're going to get their point across. Where the genics are not going to do that. They're going to sit back and be a lot more mellow. It says andric males will not be able to bulk up like the genic male and tend to not like working out for long periods of time. So if you're a male tonight watching this, then that might sometimes explain, like I know someone that works out all the time and they always complain that they can't really build muscle like their friend. Well, that's the difference between an andric guy and a genic guy. The genic males appear to have been designed by a refrigerator manufacturer. They're muscular, and they're kind of more naturally muscular. Andrics, as far as games go, they want a more direct control over the situation. As genics, as far as games go, they're more willing to let the chips fall where they may. The other thing on genics I just passed up, I could have combined this too. It says they can work out in a gym for hours because they're going to see results. They're going to really want to go to the gym because they can see the results. With the andric males won't so much, and that one's kind of misleading because you think it would be the other way around. On andrics, weight gain in a male is mainly in the belly. On genics tend to be on the heavier side anyway, both male and female, and weight is gained all over. So, like if you have belly weight, you might be more likely andric, but if you have weight gain everywhere, you'd most likely be genic. Andric males who lose their hair, it tends to leave a totally bare swath down the center with fuzzy edges above the ears and around the back of the head. Totally bald is a very strong andric characteristic. Like, you know people who are totally bald, like are famous. But this other one is like, they have that baldness in the middle with hair on either side. That's andric. Genics males lose their hair halfway between the center of their head and their ears, but retain the center portion forever. This forms a V shape, or what they call widow's peak. A bald spot on the back of the head is a very strong genic characteristic, like a friar's cap, like, where you have the bald spot in the middle and then you have kind of the hair all the way around. It says andrics may try a mustache occasionally, but do not have the patience or interest for its upkeep. But andric males who are bald on top may grow a full beard as a form of compensation. So if you know someone like that the mustaches are just too much trouble, most likely andric. Genics are the ones with a mustache or some form of beard. Generally, the more facial hair, the more genic. They'll have the beard, the big mustache. I'm thinking about some TV shows with guys that are real hairy. They're probably more likely genic. Andric females tend to be more attracted to men with facial hair. So if you like guys with facial hair, then most likely andric. Genic women are apt to be more attracted to clean-shaven men. So this is a big difference between the two styles of women, depending on what your personality is. Andric females tend to have more facial, body, and lip hair than their genic sister. So if you're a female and you have a little mustache or other facial hair, or if you have like a lot of hair on your arms and other places, you're most likely andric. Genic males tend to have more body hair than andric males. And this is all over. So this is back hair, chest hair, stomach, all that stuff. It says an andric chin makes a direct run for the Adam's apple from the chin, forming a slight curve as it goes down. And there's a picture of kind of an andric chin, where a genic chin is more of a Grecian form of neck starting at the chin. The bottom of the mandible forms a near right angle with the neck. And so you see a difference there of a more pronounced chin. So if someone has like what they call like, no chin, or they have like a, what do they call it, like a double chin, probably more andric. But if they have that defined chin that is more of a right angle, then probably more genic. Andrics have slightly more testosterone, which gives them greater width in their shoulders and narrow hips. So whether you're male or female, if you have broad shoulders with narrower hips, you're probably more likely andric. Genics have slightly more estrogen, which gives them slightly wider hips and narrower shoulders. So they're going to be more hippie, but the shoulders are not going to be so broad. And you guys definitely know if you're one of those or the other. On andrics, as a result of wider shoulders and narrower hips, their hands have plenty of room to swing when they walk, and the back of their hands will face forward. So if you guys want to just stand up for a second, like if you just stand up at your computer, your hands are going to naturally hang where the palms, the palms will face you, like face your hips, or they'll face forward. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to stand up real quick. So mine kind of face inward, but they'll face, where your hands are like parallel to your body or more perpendicular. On Genics, it says as a result, their shoulders are slightly rotated such that their hands will be more parallel to their hips, and you'll see their thumbs lead forward. That's more like where your hands are to your side and the thumbs are facing in the forward direction. That would be more Genic. In a female, I'm going to show you a picture of this in a second. In a female on andrics, there's a space about 1 inch to 2 inches between the thighs. Unless you're 30 more pounds overweight, then you can't really tell. That's like where you see people, like when you see them in jeans or bathing suits, they have a space between the upper thighs. Like you can see through that area, the thighs are not touching. In a genic female, the thighs will touch like from the crotch down to above the knee. On andrics, this is an interesting one. The pubic hairline is either half moon shaped, arching towards the navel, or goes to a peak towards the navel. The peak is a strong andric indicator. On genics, the pubic hairline is straight across. So this is like the top visible pubic hairline they're talking about. The unshaven, it would be straight across or like at a peak, like in the, well, you know the difference if you saw that. Here's a picture of the women. The andric, if you could see between the legs that there's a space all the way down. On the genics, they're not. But you also see in the genic picture the narrower shoulders and the more broad hips. In the andric picture, she's spreading them out to make it look like she has, it kind of looks like she has big hips, but she doesn't. It's just because in the picture she's holding the pants out. So what I want you to do, and maybe we'll stop for questions here in a minute, I want you to decide based on your tally marks if you're andric or genic, and then I want you to count the number of tally marks and put a number to it. So if you had, 20 genic characteristics and 20 andric, let's say you'd be 50-50. But if you had 40-20, you know what I mean? I want to know and give me some feedback on if you're more andric or versus genic, because this is also going to play into the next section of what we're going to talk about with hormones. So if you want to raise your hand and ask a question, or if you want to send me a question on the chat, there's a little chat button, and if you open that little plus sign, you can type in a question that will come to me, and I'll see it and I'll read it out for everybody. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to do this, and just make sure you don't have any questions. So just count the tally marks and let me know, or just so you know what you have in each category, because I want you to see if it matches the symptoms in the next part of the presentation. Hey, Chantel, there's no handouts on this one. The handouts that are in there are from last month. You're welcome to open them and save them or print them. They're the handouts that were from the detox webinar, so feel free to do that. And if you didn't listen to the detox webinar, you can go back, and because I sent that link out. So I didn't delete the handouts because I didn't actually realize till just now they were still in there. All right. Does anyone else, if you have a question or comment, I might pick on somebody here in a minute and see. Okay, wow, Chantel. Okay, I was actually going to pick on you, Chantel, but I didn't want to pick on someone who didn't give me feedback. So I'm going to, let's see, I have one person who's more andric than genic. but in a close approximation, so she's actually pretty balanced. Another one is 45 to 9 on genic, so she's very genic. And then I have another female who's andric. And we're going to talk about this having to do with personalities, with also especially the opposite sex here in a second. Okay, now we have another female that's more genic than andric, 57% to 43%. That's pretty awesome. Those are very balanced, and so they're going to get along more with better people if genic 39 to 19. So that's like 2 to 1 on Pat. Julie, you and I are about the same. Okay, so I'm getting you guys results. That's awesome. Now, what I want you guys to do with your results is, oh, that makes perfect sense, Julie. So what she's sending me is one person on the call did their partner, which you have to be thinking pretty fast to do that because it's hard enough to keep track of one person. And so I'm going to ask Julie just to type if I can use her example. Can I use your numbers? I started to say numbers in people's names. I thought maybe that's not a good idea. But I'll ask her if it's okay because I'm going to tell you how this works with people in relationships. I'll just let her respond. And you can use the same information later to determine, she says go for it. So you can use this information later to determine things about yourself without having hormone tests. So Jane says she had a hormone test and it showed she was testosterone dominant. And the way she answered the question, she was andric dominant. So that's great. That's what I'm hoping for and getting feedback tonight. In Chantel's case, she was genic 45 to 9, so she's 45 to 9, so she's strongly genic. She's a very genic dominant. So in relationships, it's going to be important that she is, with someone who's more andric dominant and not so much in the middle. But in Gully's case, it's interesting because she's 42 andric, 14 genic, and then her husband Peter is 22 andric, 33 genic. And this is a good ratio, a good combination actually for getting along in a couple. It may be frustrating as hell in some cases because of the personality differences between two people, but one thing that Hal Huggins says in the book is that, you can have couples fight and bicker over like little things a lot because of this androgenic personality, but they work it out. They work out because they have both sides of the coin to get through life, with problems and things that need to get done. You have an andric who will start something and a genic who will finish it, or andric will start something and the genic will stay on them to finish it. You have these things that are necessary. If you had two andrics that were dominant or two genics that were dominant, you have inherent issues, not only in the workplace but also in lifestyles and families and raising the kids and taking care of the household and who's going to do what, with what responsibility at the home. So that's like super important to understand. Teresa says she's dominantly andric, but she's also in that mid-range. She's not high one way or the other. And that's what several of the women have responded, that they're actually more of the women who responded, they're more andric than genic. And then you'll see why it's important for the partners to be somewhat more genic, which you'll see in these personality traits and the body characteristics and stuff that we also talked about. Okay, I'm going to check back into you guys' response here in a little bit. And I want to talk to you about hormones even from one more different angle. So the last line of the slide says, if you change or balance your hormones, your personality will change. Will is capitalized. So there's a lot of reasons to understand this and know this, okay? Because I work with a lot of people with hormone balancing, and I warn them always of this before we get started, because if someone's trying to balance their hormones, a lot of things can go wrong. They might feel more balanced, like especially like maybe going into menopause, but then what happens is there and them and their spouse of 20 years will all of a sudden not start getting along. There'll be issues because the one person who was, let's say, testosterone dominant, they start cleaning up the testosterone. Well, all of a sudden, the traction between the two people may change because maybe they're not feeling the same way, and they start going, ooh, I don't like that part of that person, or I want, I'm changing. And then what does the husband say? I'm going to pick on women right now because more women are on the call, but husbands say, I didn't change, you changed. Well, they did actually change. And when the hormones start changing, whether it's because you took birth control pills, which is usually in a young age, that's not usually the big deal. It's usually later in life when people start messing with hormones, like after 35 or 40, especially in the 50s, then everyone's complaining that you changed. And a lot of times people get divorced because one person changed, the other person didn't change their hormones. They're still the way they always were, and then all of a sudden now there's an issue. And it's because something that worked before, doesn't work anymore. There's a whole lot of information. I go into a lot of detail in this in the Emotional Intensive Live class that I do, which will be in October, talking about this difference, based on German New Medicine. I want to go to that in a second. So in German New Medicine, what Dr. Hammer says is that like I said, in a tribe, you can only have one alpha. And so if someone's messing around with their hormones and there is no alpha anymore, let's say you're the female and you're the alpha because you're the andric and you're the one wearing the pants, you're the one running the house, and then let's say you start changing because you start taking a bunch of estrogen and progesterone, especially if you go to some of these anti-aging clinics who are just bombarding and overloading you with estrogen and progesterone. Then what's going to happen in the household when there is no alpha anymore? Then nothing's going to get done, and everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket, as they say. So then it's like, well, what happened? What went wrong? But the other possibility is, let's say the female is the genic, and the genic is the one that takes care of all the stuff. She's the one that is doing the laundry and buying the groceries and making dinner and making sure the kids get their homework to school and making sure that, everyone's at activities on time, and they're very schedule oriented and they're very organized. And let's say that their hormones start changing either because they artificially change them or because they're going through some changes, and all of a sudden, boom, you got problems. The kids don't have their homework, someone forget about a meeting or a sports event, and things go kind of bad, wrong in another way. And so it's not like one's better than the other. That's the thing really to understand is andrics are not better than genics, and genics are not better than andrics. Both are necessary for the world to go round. But going back to Hammer's theory is that you have to have an alpha in a household. You have to. And you have to have the subordinates in the household. You have to have them all in a company. You have to have them in an office space. You have to have them in a sports team. If you don't, it does not work out. And so when things start changing around with hormones, you have to be aware of that. And it doesn't mean don't get help, especially when you're having a lot of symptoms. It just means that you have to understand this really big dynamic that's going on behind the scenes, which a lot of people don't realize. They just say, well, fix me. I just want you to fix me. Well, fixing you may not be really what you want. I mean, once you get down to it. And when it's a personality issue, just like the list we went through, the person whose personality is andric or genic doesn't think anything's wrong with them. They're not going, I need to change, I need to do anything different, but they may not like what their partner or their family member or their coworker is. But they're being who they are too. It's not about changing the personality, it's about understanding, the personality and then working around that. Because as soon as you start messing with hormones, you're going to have changes, and it may not be exactly what you think. Let's say a bunch of office women, sorry, I did it again. Let's say a bunch of office women start working together in their 30s. It's a nice little tight-knit group, and let's say it's 10 women, and they're all like, 20 to 35 years old, and they're kind of, what they are. And then they all work together for a long time, and they get to the change. And some of them are taking hormones, some aren't, some are doing other stuff, natural, some are taking, Premarin, Prempro, whatever. All of a sudden, this nice little office who's been trucking along doing great things is going to have a big drama event. And they're going to be at each other's throats, they're going to quit, they're going to leave, they're going to storm out. it's going to be a total difference. That's not like an obvious example. This happens in households too, and it's because of, you know, these changes, especially when people say, well, that classic phrase, well, I didn't change, you changed. You can almost always blame that on hormones. No matter what the exterior story is, no matter what else is going on in that household, that's what you can blame it on. Okay, there's one other thing that I wanted to talk about right here, because this also gets into some other stuff that we're going to cover a little bit more technically. And this is Hal Huggins' phrase, the double dip hip. And we put a picture from the book, and if you have this, you know what this is. It's like an indention at your hip. So even if you're overweight, it's like at the hip bone, there's a slight indention, like in the picture, and the thigh then comes out, or the waist might even come out, but right at that hip bone, like right where her panty line is, there's an indention, and this is a particular problem to be aware of. If your hip is rounded, like completely round, and there's no indention, you don't have this, okay? So a normal round, so if you see where the arrow is, and if you imagine that just being more rounded, so the hip, the thighs would be bigger, you don't have the double dip hip. In men, a bald spot at the crown of the head equals the double dip hip in women. So if they have that bald spot right in the center of the top of the head, this is double dip hip in men, okay? But what it stands for is hypoposterior pituitary. And why this is super important is these people are very super sensitive to sugar, caffeine, alcohol, and chocolate. Actually, chocolate is the biggest one. And these four products or foods will exacerbate all symptoms of everything, hormone, mood, stuff like that. So I want to go through a few things on the list. I want to talk about a little bit in kids too. So if you have the double dip hip, you'll juggle between depression and being reasonable. And you don't really have a choice. It's just there. It's always in the background. Easily set off or triggered. So very reactive. Suicidal thoughts, extremely low level. So if someone gets depressed to the point of suicidal thoughts, the thoughts will be coming like from nowhere. There may not even be anything in their life that would make them, like, not a recent event or horrible trauma or anything. They just kind of float in like, well, is it even worth being alive? Well, why am I on this planet? You know, maybe I should just end my misery. Those kind of thoughts, that could be this double dip hip thing. They're most apt to emotional instability, and they're going to be definitely more in ups and downs, even like bipolar and manic stuff. And this would be triggered and made worse by sugar, caffeine, alcohol, and chocolate. So if you have any of these issues, especially with mood disorders, or low pituitary function, which really means any kind of low function, thyroid, adrenal, any of the endocrine system, and low hormones, which you'll see on the charts in a second, you definitely want to avoid sugar, caffeine, alcohol, and chocolate, because it disrupts the pituitary function almost completely. The way it can affect children is the same, so they should avoid these same items. Even little bitty girls can have a double dip hip. And it's kind of cute the way he describes it in the book, is it's like when little girls put their hands on their hip to, you know, flirt with their daddy and get what they want, they've already compensating for a double dip hip. You know, they have that, they always try to strike a pose. They always have their hand on their hip. They're also very susceptible to these tantrums and these extreme mood things, and, you know, throwing themselves on the floor at the grocery store. All that would be under this category. And they should not have any sugar, caffeine, alcohol, or chocolate. Well, kids wouldn't have alcohol, but you know what I mean. It also says biochemistry upsets and physical signs can occur with just 8 milligrams of caffeine. A normal cup of coffee has 120 milligrams, while a Starbucks Grande has 330 milligrams of caffeine. So this can throw someone into a tizzy. Like, let's say they have their, I'm not picking on Starbucks, I'm just using an example because so many people drink it, but let's say they have their morning Starbucks, and then they get a phone call, and it just sets them off, or they have road rage, and they can't really compose themselves, and they seem a little even out of their mind sometimes, like their reactions seem a little crazy, and the family is like, what is going on here? In children, what I've seen is that I don't necessarily believe in inherited conditions, but it is kind of inherited that if the mom had hypoposterior pituitary or hypopos pit, before they were pregnant and they get pregnant, then it's likely the kids will come out with this and have these same issues. So it's very important that they don't have sugar, caffeine, or chocolate. And there's other things that have caffeine in them, but you have these kids with these monster drinks and these other highly caffeinated things that, well, even a Coke has caffeine. A Coke has more than 8 milligrams of caffeine in it. But even pills, some headache relievers and migraine relievers and medications and Midol and all that stuff has caffeine in them. So you might take something for a symptom, and if it's in the headache kind of pain reliever category, it most likely has caffeine, and it can put you down in a different category. So this is important, that you know if you have double dip hip or not. Okay, now I want to check in with questions or comments just real quick, and then we're going to get into the more kind of less fun part of the conversation, which is actual hormones. So I just want to see what you guys are saying. If you have another chat, comment, or question, feel free to send it to me. I'll check them and answer your questions. And while you guys do that, I'll just give you a second. If you need a little 2-minute break right now, that would be fine. And we're going to do another section that's going to require a notepad again, because it's going to be you taking tally marks to determine on your testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone where you fit. The andric versus genic doesn't really provide for progesterone, but it's important in this section because it's a common imbalance. Okay, well, no one's sending me questions, so I'm going to move on. All right. So the 3 main categories here, and what I want you to do is it says follow each section counting how many symptoms you have in each to help determine where your hormonal imbalances are. This is kind of like the first set, where the first set was more personality related to hormones. This is more actual physical symptoms. So this is also going to be a measurement that hopefully by the end of tonight, you will have a better idea of what's going on with you hormonally, and without having to necessarily pay for a specific hormone test. Someone just raised their hand. Let me see. Oh, someone lowered their hand. Okay. Okay, so in this list, and guys, I want you to do this too, because guys have the same hormones that women have, and women have testosterone, so it's important that everyone do the same list. I'm going to go through the symptoms of each, and you don't have to write them down. Just mark on your sheet if this is something that generally describes you or not. Okay, so estrogen deficiency symptoms include hot flashes, fatigue or chronic fatigue, headaches or migraines, night sweats, vaginal or bladder infections, incontinence issues, urinary tract infections, forgetfulness, difficulty falling asleep, poor concentration, crying easily, decreased verbal skills, irregular bleeding, testosterone imbalance, like if you happen to know that already, low libido, which is like sexual desire, painful intercourse, osteoporosis or osteopenia, or bone loss of any kind, episodes of rapid heartbeat, some people would call that even like palpitations, depression, minor anxiety, emotional instability, or feelings of despair. And that would be like general feelings of despair. So on that list, just mark how many you have and count them. I want to see if there's a question I can answer real quick. Teresa has a question that she has the double dip hip, but she only has one of the symptoms, but she has three small cups of coffee each day. I would say that I would probably stop the coffee, but I would also say that I would, there's more symptoms than that having to do with hypopituitary, so I'd also like take your temperature and stuff we're going to get to before the end, because that was more the emotional symptoms of hypopituitary. I'm glad you asked the question, though, because pituitary is the master gland in the body, and it controls the entire endocrine system. So any part of the endocrine system, like hypoadrenals, hypothyroid, hypoglycemia, can all be because of hypopituitary. There's some great, on the references I put, any of the Apex blood chemistry courses are great because they talk about a lot of these other conditions being secondary to hypopituitaryism, and that's why I brought that up first because we're going to come back to that. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay. Okay, the next list, okay, so do your count on estrogen deficiency. This one's not a checklist, but this is a little bit of information for you to understand properties of estrogens. Estrogen creates the endometrial tissue, which is how people have normal cycles. It's the part that eventually sloughs off when you have your cycle. It has to do with development of puberty. Sometimes if people are late bloomers, it's a sign of maybe an estrogen deficiency. Like if they don't start their cycles till like after 12 or 13, or like let's say they grow a lot after high school, then it's usually an estrogen imbalance. Estrogen regulates the menstrual cycle. It plumps the vaginal tissue and reduces vaginal dryness. So if people have vaginal dryness, estrogen is usually the solution. It slows bone loss. It can help reduce incidence of heart attacks. It's an anti-aging factor. It helps us stay young looking longer. It increases the sensitivity of progesterone receptors. It affects more than 300 tissue systems of the body. It uplifts the mood. It lowers LDL and increases HDL. So it lowers the bad cholesterol and increases the good cholesterol. And it decreases lipoprotein and homocysteine, which have to do with inflammation. Okay, more properties of estrogen are it affects every neurotransmitter in the brain, including serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. We're going to talk about the brain in great detail next month. That's the topic for March. It adds moisture to the skin, so if people are naturally dry, like in not just vaginal dryness, but dry skin and they're always dry, most likely they have an estrogen deficiency. And it affects brain function responsible for memory and motivation. So if memory is going or if people don't feel motivated, you would think about estrogen. So those are good tips. And then needed for verbal memory and to learn new concepts, reasoning, and fine motor skills. So estrogen does a lot. We're going to go into more detail about the different types of estrogen because that's where things can get a little bit confusing. Now this is a different list. So the first list was estrogen deficiency. This list is estrogen dominance, and we're going to get into more detail, and I'll take more questions at the end of the estrogen section. So estrogen dominance, the symptoms can include breast cyst or breast pain, like tenderness. PMS symptoms are heavy menstruation, like heavy bleeding, where like even some women can't leave the house. Irregular bleeding, fluid retention, headaches, breast adenomas, gallbladder problems, blood sugar problems, nutritional deficiencies, nervous and or irritable a lot, that's more like mood, low libido, so low libido can be on high estrogen or low estrogen, fibroids, this is usually uterine fibroids, but it can also be fibroids in the breast or fibrocystic breast, hormonal cancers, like when they say it's estrogen dominant cancer, that's usually like breast cancer or uterine cancer, bloating, weight gain, nausea, endometriosis is a classic. If you have ever had or thought you had endometriosis, you definitely are estrogen dominant. Thyroid problems, mood swings, sleep disturbances, and sugar cravings. I want to say one thing about thyroid problems, that I do thermal imaging in Houston, and I didn't really understand this connection, but when I got my thermal imaging camera, traditional Chinese medicine doctor told me that every time that he saw estrogen dominance, there was a disruption over the spine at like C7T1. It looked like a blue ball, which means the sympathetic or the parasympathetic, or the whole nervous system was disrupted, let's say. And whenever there was a blue ball on the back of the body, there was this cold spot on the front, which is where the thyroid is. So if you think about the front of the back of the neck, that is where the thyroid gland is. And so this estrogen dominance is like this pattern in the breast is kind of like hot and red and angry. It kind of snuffs out the thyroid, but it can also cause autoimmune disorders and sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system disorders too, which is not, all that detail is not here on this list. But sometimes an autoimmune disorder is just simply estrogen dominance. It says you can have estrogen deficiency and be estrogen dominant at the same time. That seems kind of crazy and it's hard to understand, but I'm going to explain it. The three types of estrogen are estradiol, estrol, and estrone. So estrogen is a type of steroid sex hormone which serves in many tissues, affecting both female and male physiology. Estradiol is considered as a type of estrogen. However, there are another two main types of estrogens, estrone and estrol. Estrol is the least effective hormone and found mostly in pregnant females, so it's high generally when you're pregnant, whereas estrone is the most abundant estrogen hormone in menopause. Estradiol is further described below. The incorporation of these three types of estrogen are called triestrogen, while the incorporation of estrol and estradiol is called biestrogen. Well, where this gets confusing is all the products and all the stuff in our food supply is estradiol. So we have estradiol that the body makes, but we also are getting it from birth control pills, prescription hormones. We're getting it from even synthetic, not just synthetic, but compounded hormones. We're getting it from dairy. We're getting it from beef. We're getting it from chicken. We're getting it from, estrogen is used in, synthetic estrogen is used in many products to try to speed the maturation process, like how fast the egg can get from an egg to a chicken. It's an eighth of the time it is in the natural world, based on using, how much milk can a cow produce is multiplied by a lot with, injections of estrogen to those dairy cows. And so why I said that you can be high and low at the same time is that when you get a hormone test, estradiol can be high or through the roof because of what you're eating that's non-organic, let's say, but then estrone, which should be the most abundant estrogen hormone at menopause, might be negligible or gone. And so someone can have symptoms in both categories. They can have symptoms in estrogen dominant and symptoms in estrogen deficiency at the very same time. And people, when doctors do blood, lab tests, well, we'll get into why that's not effective later, but let's say they do a blood test. They're not looking at the three estrogens. They're looking at the compilation of estrogen. This is also where it gets very confusing, because when they do estrogen in a blood test, it's just saying estrogen. It's not saying estradiol, estrol, and estrone. It's just saying the one, and this is the one that you get from our food supply. And so then they go, oh, your estrogen levels are fine. You don't need anything. You're good to go. But you have all the symptoms of estrogen deficiency. And this is like where it's like why those tests are not valid, because they're not telling you really what's going on. So sometimes people have to do like a hormone clean out to get the excess estradiol out, and then they have to supplement something for producing, helping their body produce estrogen, like black or blue cohosh are good solutions. But you want your body to produce what it can, but if you're overloaded with estradiol, then you got to fix that problem. So it's like it's always a balancing act. So within the estrogen family, they're still balancing, not counting the other hormones. So you can still be very genic and have estrogen dominance, but you can be deficient, especially in the later years after like 40, you can be estrone deficient and still need help there while you have fibroids and fibrocystic stuff going on and endometriosis. And that's where this slide's probably, if I could say technically, the most important thing to talk about tonight. I really want you to understand that. You cannot depend on one blood estrogen test to tell you what's happening, because it does not break this down. It's a compilation of all the estrogen, and it's not, you can't work with it. You can't use that information. Okay, on the three types of estrogens, the problems are many pharmaceutical products, anti-aging products, and foods are laced with estrogen. I have just recently been working, well, I've always worked with hormone tests for a long time, like at least 15 years, but just like in the last year, but especially the last few years, but really in the last year, the endocrinologists at the labs that I work with, they say people cannot even use shampoo before having a hormone test done. And doctors don't tell you this. If you're using an anti-aging cream or serum or whatever, they have estrogens in them. That's how they work, is they're like horse urine kind of estrogens, and they're estrogens out of urine that's collected in like porta potties and stuff like that. That's what ends up in our pharmaceutical products, is the urea is urine, human urine, and then they add their little estrogen concoction that's also given to our food supply, and then that's what we're putting on our face and our hair and our nails and everything that's anti-aging products. So even if you go do a test for hormones, you cannot use any products on your skin, not even deodorant, because, why deodorant would have anti-aging stuff in it? Don't ask me. Do not know. But it can have a big influence. Creams, lotions, even like some of the, you'll see even like anti-aging body washes. And you have to be really careful, because you can be throwing your hormones out of balance by using these products. Also, the products include birth control pills, non-organic meats, milk, and dairy products. and farm-raised fish are now laced with hormones. It sounds ridiculous, but if you're going to buy fish, do not buy farm-raised. You have to buy wild. Wild are not laced with hormones. But they just like with other meats, they throw antibiotics and hormones into these farm-raised areas where these fish are super crowded and they're basically full of hormones. And so I never buy farm-raised fish ever, because you're just getting this whole concoction of crap that's just like a non-organic meat. Anti-aging soaps, moisturizers, and other skincare products, like I've already said that, are laced with artificial hormones. Synthetic estrogen started being used to increase the size of cattle and chickens in the early 1950s. I don't know if you guys have ever compared like a chicken bought at like Sam's or Costco to a chicken bought at Whole Foods that's organic. They're like twice the size. Like if you get a little organic, natural chicken, or you happen to have someone who raises chickens, you know, they're small. They're not big, and the white meat is not white. It's kind of a little beige. It's arsenic in the chicken that makes the white meat white. But if you go to like Sam's or Costco, they look like small turkeys. They're like huge. This is because of what they're pumped with to get them to that size. That is not natural. And there's even hormones in our recycled water supply. So if you're on city water, you're basically drinking water that's, you know, been recycled multiple times, and they have, I mean, you can find this stuff on the internet. They have hormones in them in the water. They have cholesterol meds that have been traced in the water, you know, all steroids traced in the water. You're just getting who knows what in the water supply. So it's important to have filters and things like that. But what's most important, you know, if you think about these anti-aging products, I'm going to go back to that for a minute. That's not been around a really long time. This is like a recent phenomenon in the last few years. But you can really throw things off for yourself by using them and not knowing what's in the ingredients. And they're not always listed. The other thing that isn't listed here is sylvestrol. You know, sylvestrol is the hormone. I know Hannah Kroger talked about it a lot, but it's the hormone that's in non-organic milk, because it's given to the cows to produce more milk. And this is why Walmart had a class action lawsuit. It's not just that it was a Walmart milk. It was just a lot of people happened to buy Walmart milk, and that's why the young boys were getting breast. And I have a few clients that have this issue, and they were drinking lots of non-organic milk. But the boys are getting breast, and girls are starting their periods, you know, like 8 years old. And that's not natural. You know, natural is like 12 to 13. But these days, if someone doesn't have their cycle start by the time they're 12, they're like freakish. You know, that people think, oh my God, you didn't start yet? Well, it's not natural to have a period starting at 8 or 9 years old. I mean, you might already start thinking at that point there's an estrogen dominance issue. Okay, now we're going to get into androgens next. Uh-oh, this thing is flipping out. Before we do that, though, I want to just go in and check on questions again. Okay, so Teresa commented that she does have a low temperature, around 97, pretty constantly since a young age, and know this to be a problem from the last webinar. Yeah, that's an indication of low thyroid and possibly low adrenal. And so that's something that would also have to do with that hypopituitary thing and why to give up the coffee and sugars and chocolate and alcohol. And Joe, I don't know if you have a mic, but do you have a mic to ask your question? Joe, are you there? I don't know if Joe has a mic. Joe, if you, I couldn't hear if you're saying anything. You might want to type your question, and I'll read it and then answer the question. Okay, so Gaia says, people I've studied with say that Premarin is not broken down in the water treatment process. High altitudes are where it starts, and it washes down through the river, so by the time it reaches Houston, the water supply is like an estrogen cocktail. That is really special, Gaia. I'm glad you shared that. I believe it, though, because if you think about it, you know, the southern states get all the crap from the northern states, and then by the time it gets here, I'm sure it's like a cesspool. And not only that, but you're talking about the natural water. I'm also talking about water supplies and water towers and these water holding tanks that are basically filtered from, you know, our current toilet collection systems and stuff like that. So you can just imagine, and then bottled water and all that. I mean, if you guys go look online and do just Google water contamination or what's in the water you're drinking, you will see tons of information online. Gaia adds that Vicki Opfer and Hannah taught that. And, well, that's where I learned it from, is the Hannah stuff. I didn't know about Vicki, but so much information if you just go out there and look for it, and, you know, why it's important to, you know, take care of yourself and learn these things to take care of yourself. Okay, so thanks, Gaia, for that additional information. Okay, so now we're going to go on to androgens. So androgens should match somewhat how you answered your andric aspects. So I want you to go through this list too and make notes. So if you have acne and or oily skin, these are all symptoms of excess androgens. If you have facial hair, especially if you're a female, deepened voice, this could be male or female, but you know guys have that sometimes deep voice, you know, radio announcer kind of voice, but the deeper the voice, the more androgens there are. Ovarian cyst or history of hypoglycemia, or this can be low blood sugar, of course, mid-cycle pain, which would be like not during your menstrual flow, but pain and, you know, mid-cycle, which would be like at the end of second week. Low HDL, which is the good cholesterol. Thinning scalp hair, this would be, you know, women who are losing their hair. I had a case recently where a woman, we had actually worked on a lot of different things with her hair loss, thyroid and adrenal, and really nothing was working, nothing was helping, and we couldn't get her temperature up no matter what we tried. And I had her do a hormone test, and she showed testosterone dominance, and the other estrogen or progesterone were deficient, and she is now working with taking testosterone to try to help with the hair loss, which wouldn't be my first go-to on a female, but it was in her case. Breast cancer risk, painful nipples, agitated, angry, and irritable. These are symptoms of excess androgens. Now, this is the list of androgen deficiency. This is for someone who might have, low testosterone, loss of libido, impaired sexual function. This would be like, I can't think of the word for it right now, but you know what I'm talking about. Aches, pain, arthritis, incontinence, thin skin, thin tissue of the vulva or the labia that would be maybe get tears easily, loss of muscle tone. Even if someone's exercising and doing stuff, they'll feel kind of like flabby, wrinkly skin, hot flashes, depression, lack of drive, lack of confidence, and lack of motivation. One thing that causes androgen deficiency that I didn't put in the slides that I'm seeing a lot as far as the side effect of a drug is statin drugs. Statin drugs are going to be just like the heart healthy diet. Actually, people realized later that that was actually so big of a cause of so many health issues for people was lack of good fats, and now everybody figured that out, and it became this big thing: eat butter, do paleo diet, all this stuff. The same thing is going to happen with statin drugs. Just mark my words. In the next 5 to 10 years, they're going to say, "Oh, we didn't realize," all this stuff. But when people take Crestor, Lipitor, and all these other drugs, if you go look at the side effects on the drug websites and the clients I see, you'll have a guy who is like, or a woman, that doesn't matter, who's kind of normal, active, driven, getting things done. They start taking statin drugs. Not only do they usually have a lot of muscle cramps and heart cramps and all kinds of side effects, but they become couch potatoes. They are like a man in menopause. So it's called like andropause. And so it's like, they don't want to do anything. They don't want to get off the couch. They don't want to mow the yard. They don't want to go anywhere. They're just basically wanting to do nothing. And they're not motivated to make a change. They start gaining weight. They're just, they go from like testosterone dominant to testosterone deficiency in a pretty quick amount of time, like 3 to 6 months. Most men hate the way they feel on statin drugs. And properties of androgens are they're cardiovascular protective, they help with brain function, they build bones, they enhance libido, build muscle, anti-aging to the skin, and antidepressant. If someone is like working out and not getting results, if they have no sex drive, if they have that saggy, flabby skin, but they're saying they're walking or they're doing certain exercise and they're not getting any kind of seeing any benefit, it's usually because they're testosterone deficient, and that can be men or women. Okay, so before we go into progesterone, I wanted to see if there's any questions on the androgen section. This should kind of match what we did with the androgens, except this is a lot less information than there was with estrogen. Joe, I'm going to try you one more time. Your hand is still up. Are you able to ask a question? Okay. She can, I don't think. Okay, so if there's no more questions, I'm going to go to progesterone. Okay, these are the symptoms associated with progesterone deficiency. Progesterone is not listed between andric or genic, so you're going to have to kind of do this like from a fresh start. If you've had any history of fibrocystic breast or breast pain, this is the list. Anxiety, also fluid retention, if you feel puffy or if you press on your skin and there's that indentation that doesn't go away right away. Stressed easily, weight gain, irritability, breakthrough bleeding, PMS. Really, there's PMS symptoms in any of the imbalances, as you've probably noticed. Low body temperature, hair loss, headaches or migraines, endometriosis, sleep disturbances, heavy periods, cramps, fibroids, hypothyroidism, and bone loss. I want to talk about a few of these before we go to the next slide to give you a little bit more information. On low body temperature and low thyroid, those to me are the same. They equal each other. But this is where progesterone plays into this. And someone just called me today with this issue. I put someone on thyroid support about a week ago, and this is very common. She called me then and said that when she took the thyroid meds, that her heart was racing and she felt like she had too much caffeine. That is almost always the case if someone has low thyroid and low progesterone. If you've ever taken thyroid support and you felt like it was too much, or like taking caffeine, or you had heart palpitations or racing, because progesterone is a buffer for the other hormones. So if someone takes adrenal stuff or thyroid stuff and they feel kind of wiggy or jiggy, then you probably need progesterone. It's just kind of a classic sign. A doctor in Houston told me one time that progesterone is the buffer for thyroid meds, and I found that to be true. I mean, every time someone calls me and says that, I used to always say, oh, okay, we need to do a hormone test. And now I go, okay, well, here's a list of symptoms, basically, this thing you guys are looking at. And then I go, okay, well, how many of these do you have? They usually have a lot of them, and then we just start supplementing some progesterone. The other one I wanted to talk about is the sleep disturbances. Most of the time when people are taking progesterone, they sleep better. And I don't know why exactly, why progesterone has this big effect on sleep, but when progesterone is deficient, even if they've tried melatonin or 5-HTP or other things, or maybe they've been on some sleep medication for a long time, usually the progesterone is the issue there. I mean, out of all the hormones, it seems to have the biggest effect on sleep. And then the third thing is the reason progesterone deficiency is showing up with endometriosis as a symptom is endometriosis is actually an estrogen dominant quality. But generally, when someone's estrogen dominant, you're talking about really the ratio between estrogen and progesterone. So if someone is estrogen dominant, they're almost naturally progesterone deficient. So some of the symptoms here are going to match the same list of estrogen dominance as progesterone deficiency, because as progesterone comes up, the ratio between the two gets better, and it just balances it out. So if you see some symptoms common, you can work at it from either angle, either reducing the bad estrogen or increasing progesterone. Okay, more progesterone deficiency symptoms are irregular cycles. This can be at any age, spotting between cycles, infertility, anxiety, overreacting, easily alarmed, like you walk up behind them, they're always jumpy, stress, feelings of confusion, mood swings, irritability, nervousness, jittery, or depression. I want to say one thing, that almost in every case of infertility or miscarriages that I've seen has either been emotional or progesterone deficiency, and it's like pretty easy to resolve. The problem, again, is when people go to infertility clinics make money on fertility treatment. They don't make money on doing saliva hormone tests. They do blood hormone tests, which, remember, are not accurate. So when you go to fertility clinic, they make money by doing fertility treatments. They're not trying to work on emotions. They're not trying to balance your thyroid, which would also help you get pregnant. So it's important to understand and know. I work with a lot of fertility cases with good results because you're looking at things from like a different angle. The other thing with irregular cycles is, let's say you have a woman who's 35, 38 years old, and they think they're going into perimenopause. It's generally that they're progesterone deficient. They'll start having irregular cycles, which people call perimenopause, but you want to extend your period or your cycle as long as you can. I mean, that's super important, because if you have a hysterectomy or something at like 38 or 40, you're going to age quickly, because you want to try to keep that cycle really until about age 50. I mean, the best you can. Some people are like, oh, just take it out, you know, just surgically remove it. And I understand that when they've had really horrible cycles and periods. But, you know, what's happened is they started out with having maybe issues. Maybe they started having their cycle when they were young, like 9 or 10. Then they had endometriosis. Then they had something else. Then they had something else. And then they have heavy bleeding. They can't leave the house. Well, all of those are estrogen-dominant symptoms. So if they would have just did some cleanup and regulated the cycle, but then when you start throwing hormones on that and birth control pills on that, I know it's necessary because that's how people are. They don't want to get pregnant when they're young, or they're not married or whatever, but they're kind of creating their own mess in a way too. And I understand birth control pills. Other thing I want to say right now before I forget about birth control pills is it's depending on an andric versus a genic person, different birth control pills work differently for different people. Like there's low estrogen. That would work better for who? Genics, because genics are estrogen dominant. If you gave someone a high estrogen or normal amount of estrogen to a genic, they're going to feel bad, and they're going to have bad reactions to birth control pills. If you remember, I said on andrics that take birth control pills, which are loading your body with estrogen on purpose, they're going to feel better because it balances out the testosterone. So you have to think about like what you're putting in your body. What I highly, highly do not recommend is these shots and these things they insert in you that, like, you know, I'm not going to name any names of products, but everyone knows what they are. They keep women from having cycles for 3 months or longer or indefinitely. This is like super bad news when these girls get older and want to have a family, because they have screwed up their natural cycles so bad that many times it cannot happen, because I can't fix, or they can't fix what they did to themselves by, you know, the convenience of a 3-month shot or something like that. So if you have a daughter or granddaughter or yourself, think about that, because if you don't want to ever have kids and you don't care what's going on hormonally, then okay, do whatever. But if you care, then I would not do those things, because they're so hard on the body, and have these, what this guy named, one of my instructors in endocrinology was a guy named Dr. Datis Karazian, and he said they cause plastic changes. Plastic changes mean semi-permanent. They're not like little things you're doing to yourself. I mean, Dr. Datis was in San Diego, and you know, there's a guy in Houston that's a very famous anti-aging doctor who's super expensive. If you're in Houston, you know who I'm talking about. And you know, it's like hormone overload. He just bombards everybody with hormones, and some people feel better, some people don't really, some people feel better for a while. Well, what Datis does is, his job is to go clean these people out. After they've spent, you know, $20,000, $30,000 in an anti-aging doctor, then Datis has the job of fixing this hormone overload, because then they go get hormone results, and these anti-aging doctors say, oh, it doesn't matter, you can have as much progesterone as you want, so don't worry about what the lab test says. But that's stupid. I mean, that is totally stupid. And so then someone else has to go fix that, and the fixing it can make people feel bad because of the transitions of the hormones changing again. So it's not like an easy thing. Okay, the roles and properties of progesterone are this: decreased menstrual bleeding, decreases fat storage. I always think of Marilyn Monroe as being progesterone deficient. She was beautiful, you know, but she was just like a full-figured size 14. And if you think about some of like the body shape of a progesterone deficient is usually bigger breasts, more rounded, more curvy. Some people like that, but that's like the mental picture of this, like watery tension and, you know, kind of poofy and kind of stuff like that. So if you like a more lean look, you might definitely think of checking progesterone. Progesterone is a natural anti-cancer hormone, especially protective of the breast. It increases the body's supply of oxygen. This could be when, like my clients have said, you're oxygen deficient. It might be progesterone. helps prevent hardening of the arteries. It improves brain structure and function and memory, increases metabolic rate. It helps regulate water retention. It's required for conception and gestation. It increases intelligence of the fetus. That's super important. Mild sedative in large doses, which helps. That's one of the reasons I think it helps people sleep. It protects against miscarriages. If someone has had miscarriages, even one, they should definitely get their hormones in place before they try to get pregnant again, because they might have 2 or 3 miscarriages because of the progesterone levels. It prevents PMS. It stimulates new bone formation. It's anti-aging to the skin. It inhibits fibrocystic breast disease. It's a natural antidepressant. It facilitates thyroid hormone action, and it normalizes blood sugar. Both estrogen and progesterone, when they're low, you can just like look in yourself in the mirror one day and go, wow, what just happened? Why are my pores bigger? Why do I have little cracks and wrinkles that I didn't have a month ago? And it's almost like, I'm going to say this, not to say this the wrong way, but it's like this cruel joke on women for some reason, because if someone has lots of androgens, like testosterone, they're high andric, you know, they're going to age more gracefully, honestly. They're going to not have the wrinkles and the little lines and stuff like that. But, you know, in nature, when someone's past the childbearing ages, it is a property in nature anyway for women that their age, I mean, their skin changes, because, you know, if you think about it biologically, they're not trying to attract a mate to have offspring. So it's almost like, okay, well, I'm not mating, so, or not supposedly mating, so everything can just kind of go to pot. It seems unfair. So if someone's more genic than andric, you are gonna want to think about that, because there is going to be some age, especially when the hormones really start changing, you're looking in the mirror and go, wow, I don't even know what just happened. And that's very common. And so just remember that that's a play on these hormones, but it's a delicate fix. Okay, more properties of progesterone, sorry. Reduces spotting, tones the blood vessels, it reduces irritability and anxiety, it reduces testosterone imbalance, it prevents endometrial cancer, it's an anti-aging hormone, it's useful in some cases of seizure disorders, it helps prevent high blood pressure, it reduces the risk of autoimmune disorders because of reducing that estrogen dominance that I mentioned a while ago. It increases IgE to help prevent sinus, respiratory, vaginal infections, and allergic reactions. It increases the sensitivity of estrogen receptors. It's a natural diuretic, which helps with that water weight. It raises HDL and lowers triglycerides. It restores sex drive. It functions as a precursor to corticosteroids and other steroidal hormones. And it blocks estrogen side effects and excess estrogen, back to the estrogen dominance. I do want to say one thing on the lower triglycerides. A lot of times when women have high triglycerides, it's not actually their diet. It's either low thyroid or low progesterone, which many times go hand in hand. So if your doctor's told you that your triglycerides are too high, I would always go to checking your temperature and checking thyroid and progesterone levels before even ever considering a statin drug or cholesterol reducing medication. Okay, more progesterone roles and properties. It increases endurance during exercise or stamina. It calms and protects the nervous system. It is protective effort on brain chemistry, neurochemistry, which we're going to talk about next month. It reduces the cravings for sweets and carbs. The thymus gland depends on progesterone, which is your immune system. It's the most protective hormone the body produces, and it's a buffer. Remember, I think that's the last thing, is the buffer. Improves the efficiency of the heart. It's a basic hormone of adaptation and resistance to stress. It restores normal sleep patterns. It enhances the number of insulin receptors on cells. It's used by the adrenals to produce anti-stress hormones, and it works as a buffer to other hormones such as thyroid hormones, which I've already mentioned. Okay, sex hormone influences, meaning what we've just talked about. I'm going to go through this list and then go to questions. So these are the things to consider why your hormones may be screwed up. Meat and dairy hormones, cholesterol, estradiol, already mentioned. We're bombarded with these products like all over the place, including the other slide where I talked about anti-aging products. Emotions, I'm going to talk about this in a minute a little bit more, but this hormone thing is also a survival mechanism of dominant versus submissive. I'll just talk about this right now. So in the wild, in a herd, let's say, there's one alpha, and as far as a male goes. And one of two things happen. The alpha will win their position, and then other young bucks or whatever will come up and challenge the alpha, and either they get killed or they leave the herd, or they become basically gay. Their testosterone goes in the tank and they become effeminate, or they become genic. And that's not like any kind of judgment. This is what happens in nature. There's not just girl, let's say elk in a herd. There's boys and girls, but there's only one alpha. As a survival mechanism, everything else shifts based on who's established as alpha. When the alpha gets old and decrepit, some young buck will come in and take his place, and then he's cast out from the herd and he'll usually die. Now, in our world, we're mammals and we're in our own little herds and tribes, you know, our family of origin, our workplace. You know, if you've ever had like two women dominant testosterone andric people in the same workplace, it's not good. They're going to be fighting and vying for position and, you know, trying to get the other one out of there and not getting along, and this is not pretty. And this is what will happen. One will leave. Ultimately, they have to leave. There's no other choice. Or one will eventually bow down. They will cow down and just their hormones will go in the tank, actually. So this happens a lot of times in our, you know, human mammal lives, like when a mother-in-law moves into our household, or let's say a dominant stepdaughter. Let's say the stepdaughter is the one who wears the pants, the dad or your husband doesn't, and then the stepdaughter is in your household and you wore the pants. You and that stepdaughter, if you're a female, will not get along, because she wants to rule the roost and you want to rule the roost, and there's just it's not gonna happen. So one of you is gonna leave, or one of you is gonna go into hormone changes. Now the hormone changes in that case are not necessarily bad. It's just a survival mechanism. That's what number 2 means, is that hormones can change based on your environment, and they change all the time based on environment. Sometimes women will come in and they'll have all these things that we're talking about, and I'll say, well, what just changed? Oh, my mother-in-law moved in and about 2 years ago, and then everything went to, you know, downhill about within 2 months of her moving in. And then we look at all these hormones, and even if I have a hormone test on them previously, I look and compare, and I'm like, wow, that is a big difference, you know. So you see it. You see it through testing, but you also see it in the way they answer these questions. The third thing is liver function. And the question is, when was your last liver cleanse? The liver we talked about a lot last month in the detox workshop. If you didn't listen to that one, you might want to go back and listen to it. It's on how to detox different organs, what the importance is, what order do you detox. But see, the liver has to do with conjugation of hormones and methylation of hormones. So the process is, and this also will help explain why also blood work is not valid on many hormones, which I mentioned somewhere in the slide, but I'll talk about it now because it has to do with the liver. Okay, so from cholesterol, your body makes hormones. That's why when people get their cholesterol numbers way down, like in 60 and 80, they're going to start having this male menopause or female menopause symptoms, because their body doesn't have enough cholesterol to produce hormones. Hal Huggins plus Weston Price plus some other pretty well-known people said, if you want to eat butter actually to get your cholesterol up if you're having hormone problems. The very first thing wrong with you may just be that you don't have enough cholesterol. But from cholesterol, the liver is what has the biggest responsibility or role of responsibility in making usable hormones. So let's say the doctor takes your blood work and they take a 3 thyroid hormone panel, which is very common with TSH, T3, T4, or FTI, T3, T4, something like that. And they say, oh, your hormones are fine, your body's fine. All that test did was tell you, did your body produce thyroid hormones or not? That's all it said. After your body produces the thyroid hormones, it's in your bloodstream, then it checked, or you're taking a pill for thyroid hormones. Those hormones have to go through the liver and be converted to something usable. Then they have to be uptaken at the thyroid receptor site, and then they have to be converted from T3 to T4. And it's a lot of things going on there that's past the blood work. If the liver is like fatty liver or bogged down because you haven't cleaned it, it's like an oil filter of your car. If you've never, I mean, we're taught to change our oil every so many miles, but no one teaches us to do a liver cleanse so many years or so many months. And so the liver is super important when it comes to hormone health. The next thing is nutrition. The body needs good nutrition for every body function, amino acids, minerals, vitamins. It needs it all. So if people, Americans tend to eat the same 10 foods every day. 10's about the limit, and they're not usually varying spices or eating the same spices every day. They're eating the same fruits every day, the same vegetables every day. So they're not getting really broad spectrum on the vitamins and nutrition. Some people don't like vegetables. They just don't like them. Some people eat too much junk food. But nutrition is super important for all the function of all these conversions and all these transitions. The adrenal function is very affected by stress and sleep schedule and diet, but the adrenals have a lot to do with production of hormones, especially estrogen. And so it's not just an ovary thing, it's this whole system thing. And so if the adrenals are compromised, then we're going to talk about sleep next month too, sleep and brain. We're going to get more into this, but the adrenals are super important. So if you're stressed out, living on caffeine, not getting enough hours of sleep, then your hormones are going to be influenced. The pituitary function, it says here, mostly affected by sugar and caffeine, but remember alcohol and chocolate. This is that hypopituitary or double dip hip. The hypothalamus is something most people don't talk about, but it's really supported by super green foods like spirulina, blue-green algae, chlorella. There's almost nothing else that really supports the hypothalamus. And so the hypothalamus is another master gland. And if it's having issues, then there's not much that can help it except the super green foods. So they're important to have in your diet regularly. And then cholesterol, I already said this, but it's necessary for the body to produce adequate hormones. And that's the big problem. And I think it was 121 that they said that they want cholesterol to be at a minimum. And so you can go look this up on the internet, but within a few weeks of Lipitor coming on the market, which was the first statin drug, the acceptable ranges of cholesterol numbers were lowered automatically compared to what was considered normal prior to that drug being on the market. So you might want to look at that. I mean, they're basically artificially lowering cholesterol levels to an unhealthy level. I'm going to see, before we get into this slide, just what questions we have, because this kind of brings up another round of stuff. Teresa is asking, what is endometriosis? Endometriosis is where people have a lot of pain and discomfort in their female area, but it's also like they have really heavy bleeding and really thick clotting. So when they have cycles, it's thick clotted blood, and it's very painful, and it's usually they want to do an ablation, or that's usually the cause of when people have premature, not premature, but early hysterectomies. It's almost always because of endometriosis. But it's basically a super thick lining of the uterus that causes all this aggravation, and it's from estrogen dominance or progesterone deficiency. Okay, let me see what's going on with the hand raising. Okay, that's still Joe, but she can't. I still have her unmuted. Okay, so if there's no other questions, I am going to move on to the next slide, keep us on time. So adrenal, thyroid, and blood sugar, these three have a direct relationship on each other. It's called, well, it's like a triangle. It's like a bidirectional triangle. And so low adrenal affects low thyroid and low blood sugar. Low thyroid affects low adrenal, low blood sugar, all that. So these three are almost impossible to fix by just addressing one of them. So I put them together on this because usually with my clients, if they have one of these, I usually tell them, well, number one, on scans, I see that they're all low, or 2 out of 3 will be low. So these are the tips I have for if you have low adrenal, low thyroid, or low blood sugar, which is still in the hormone categories. So you want to take your oral temperature AM and PM in a resting state. This means not after a shower, not after exercise, not after getting out of a hot car, but first thing in the morning and at night, like when you haven't just been doing something. You don't want to drink hot tea and do this. You want to take the resting state. You want your temperature to be above 98 degrees, and if it's lower than 98, then you have hypo something, and that's when you go back to the other list of, reduce or eliminate sugar, carbohydrate, well, this says carbohydrates too, but also alcohol, caffeine, all that stuff. It says reduce or eliminate the simple carbohydrates because of the blood sugar. So this is pasta, rice, wheat, gluten, starchy carbs, salty and crunchy snacks, chips, pretzels, cookies, desserts, all that stuff. If you're trying to work on adrenal and thyroid, not only do you have to do this from the low pituitary angle, because it's very likely you have hypopituitarism, but it's also you want to balance that blood sugar. And if you don't balance the blood sugar and you continue to eat these foods, then you're going to be longer on adrenal and thyroid. So a big question people always ask me is, well, how long do I have to take this stuff? How long do I have to take adrenal support? How long do I have to take thyroid support? And it depends. You know, what else are you doing? What's your diet? What else are you doing in this category? Like it says, always eat protein for breakfast and don't ever skip breakfast. Coffee is not breakfast. So you should have some protein every morning for breakfast. If it's one boiled egg, and if you keep skipping breakfast and don't have some protein at breakfast, or you go for cereal, or you go for a kolache or a donut or something like that, then the adrenals and thyroid are not going to heal maybe ever, but maybe a long time. Eat small meals or snacks throughout the day, and I put small. Eating every few hours doesn't mean eat full meals every 3 or 4 hours. It means, you know, have a handful of nuts, have some turkey jerky, have, you know, something that works with your blood type, but do like little snacks and eat smaller meals when you eat meals. The worst thing you can do as a hypoglycemic is go eat a big meal anyway. It'll put you right to bed or make you tired. Go to bed so you can get at least 6 hours of REM sleep, preferably 7 to 9 hours. Just because you lay in bed 7 to 9 hours doesn't mean you got 6 hours of REM sleep either, especially if you get up a lot because of, let's say, a baby, or you have to pee a lot, or you have pain, or you have someone who snores next to you, or something like that. So 6 hours of REM sleep might mean you're in bed 9 or 10 hours to get that much REM sleep. REM means rapid eye movement, and if you watch people when they're sleeping and their eyes are fluttering, they're in REM sleep. It's usually the dream state as well. And get rid of the TV, iPad, cell phone, and other electronics from the bedroom. High-definition TVs can disrupt sleep patterns, even if they're on the other side of the wall from your bed. So if your bed like headboard is on the other side of the living room wall, and that's where you have your high-def TV, this can really definitely cause sleep pattern issues. And one thing I want to say here too is about kids. I mean, cell phones, I swear, are the end of normal human beings and communication. And what happens with kids, like I had a client come in recently, and it was a very small child, like, well, not that small, he was like 8 years old. And he showed adrenal issues, he showed sleep issues, he came in because of learning and focus issues at school. And, you know, I was asking him about sleep, and the mom was like, oh, well, he goes to bed at 9, and he doesn't get up till 6. And I'm like, well, on here it's saying he's not getting enough sleep. And so I keep questioning him, and the mom kept answering for him. And then finally I said, what electronics do you have in your bedroom? And he said, you know, TV, iPad, and cell phone. And I said, well, how long, when you go to bed and your mom thinks you're going to sleep, I mean, she was sitting right here, but I said, how long are you on your cell phone? He said, usually till the battery goes dead. And I'm like, well, how long is that? And he said he didn't know, sometimes 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I hear this from kids all the time. And then the same kid told me that in his school, the 2 classes that he was doing badly in allow cell phones in the class, and you can listen to music or you can listen to stuff, and he watches YouTube. And these are 2 classes he's not doing well in, and they let him have his phone. And I was like, so they want the kid to be on, you know, ADD meds. I'm getting totally off subject here, but it just drives me nuts. They want him to be on ADD meds, and it's because he's on a cell phone in bed, and the parents don't take the phone from him, and he says he can't sleep. And there's been some things that have gone around that I've seen on email that says when you're on an iPad, because of their, not just iProducts, any phone, Android, whatever, but it's that bright light that's the cell phone or iPad generated light that disrupts your sleep rhythms and your circadian rhythms. So if you're the type that gets in bed and gets on their iPad and reads something or researches something or plays a game, it's going to affect your sleep. And especially with children who already have, you know, kind of crazy patterns, especially, you know, like for possible other reasons we'll discuss next month. Okay, now why saliva hormone testing is best, I've kind of mentioned this, but blood test shows what hormones your body produced or based on what medication you're taking, not what happened after that. The liver has to convert the hormones into usable form. Blood tests do not show the end result of what your hormones are doing. After the liver converts hormones into usable form, various receptor sites uptake the converted hormones. It's common to see 3 or 4 panel thyroid lab tests that do not show the conversion or uptake by the thyroid gland. There is an 8 thyroid panel that I recommend if you're going to get blood work done, because it shows not only did your body get or produce the hormones, but it does show the uptake. Many people who are told they do not have hormone imbalances or deficiency when they actually do. So many people are told they don't, but all the time they show up with all these symptoms and all these questionnaires filled out and a bunch of symptoms, and then no one's helping them. No one's doing anything. Hormones you can check at home. So these are 2 tests I tell people all the time. The one is the temperature, which I already mentioned. The additional information it says here is if your temperature is in the 97 range, you would be considered marginally low. If you're 96, it would be moderately low thyroid. And if you're 95 or below, you're very low. This is a person who's going to have a very hard time losing weight. They're going to usually have high cholesterol. They're going to usually have hair loss, low metabolism, feel crappy, feel tired. So the lower your temperature is a direct indication of what your thyroid is doing. The adrenal pulse test is an easy test to do at home, and you don't need anything except for some kind of measuring of the minute with a second hand. So what you do is you lay down on your bed or massage table or couch or whatever, and you lay in a flat position for a few minutes, and let's say 5 minutes. And you check your pulse. And the way I check pulse for myself is right under my ear. Like right under your ear is where the carotid artery goes down the neck to the collarbone. And if you want to do this real quick, you can just feel that pulse. And you usually check it with one finger, not all your fingers. So just put one finger over this carotid artery, and you'll feel the pulse. And that's what you're going to count for 1 minute. Another good place to check, but this doesn't work for some people because they have low pulse, is on your wrist. So you can check your on the wrist on your palm side. There's an artery that goes right there that most people is visible, and you can put your thumb on the other hand over that wrist, and you can feel the pulse there. Once you feel the pulse, then you watch the second hand and you check it for 1 minute and just count how many pulses you feel. Then once you get that number, you stand up, pretty quickly as you can, and then immediately take your pulse again. If the pulse drops, you automatically have adrenal insufficiency, because your pulse should actually rise with standing upright than laying down and being rested. You can do this test several times a day to check your adrenal pattern, just like an ASI test, which will say, is the adrenals okay in the morning? Are they okay at noon? Are they okay at night? And you'll see, what the adrenals are doing throughout the day, because sometimes they might be fine like at noon, but they're not fine when you wake up, and that would be the people that have a hard time getting going, or the kids that you have a hard time getting out of bed. Here I just included this. This is some of the hormone test kits if you are interested in getting a saliva hormone test kit. So I have them listed. I'm not going to go through these in great detail because I want to have time for questions, but there's the expanded postmenopausal, and it shows what it tests. There's the cycling female, which checks your hormones for an entire month. It's 11 samples. The perimenopause is 2 samples over 30 days, and it checks basically the same thing as the expanded postmenopausal. So postmenopausal means you are not having a cycle anymore for whatever reason. Perimenopause means you're kind of having the change, and so your cycles are not regular. Cycling means you have a regular cycle. Male androgen test, it's a test I would also recommend for women that are andric. So if you're andric, you should probably do the male androgen test, because it gives me a little bit more information on those androgen pathways. And then the adrenal stress index test is a way to check your cortisol levels throughout the day, and you end up taking the test at 8 a.m., noon, 3 p.m., and then in the evening before bed. And it shows the cortisol output, which is a measurement of how your adrenals are doing, and if they're fine or low or high or dysregulated. Some of the references, and I'm going to leave it on this page for a few minutes while I check questions. A lot of this information tonight came from these different sources. Who Makes Your Hormones Hum by Hal Huggins. That was the first half of the slides. I highly recommend this book. It is priceless. Even though he's a dentist, he got the information mostly from Dr. Melvin Page. I put Dr. Melvin Page's website. It has a ton of information. Stop the Thyroid Madness is a decent website for why blood testing for thyroid is not valid and what else to do, and references. Dr. Datis Karazian is one of my personal instructors, and his website is thyroid360.com. That's one of his websites. He has several great books out. Dr. Mark Starr is someone I know personally, and he taught me a lot too about thyroid that he calls type 2 hypothyroidism. His website's there. German New Medicine is the emotions related to hormone issues, and I put a website of the person who I learned German New Medicine from, who's Ilsadora Laker. And then I took a lot of classes with Apex's blood chemistry and hormone workshops, which I highly recommend, but they're limited to licensed practitioners only. They are excellent and definitely worth the travel, time, and money if you're a practitioner and you want to learn more about this subject tonight. Next month, we're going to talk about brain power and sleep and how to resolve issues with both. So I'm going to go back to the reference slide in case you want to write any of those down, and let me see. If you have any questions, we have just about another 7 minutes left. It was a lot of information, I know. I talk fast, but to get through 2 hours of information and have this much to cover on hormones, I can't talk slow for one thing, so let's just say that. So there's really no choice, but we get through a lot of material that way. So Jane says that's the type of test that she did. I think that must be the saliva hormone test, and that did show that she was progesterone deficient. If you have any other questions about this test, that now's a good time to ask about that too. Let's see. I'll give you guys another minute to ask questions. Let's see, what else can I tell you? I think that one thing that Hal Huggins says, but I've heard this from also other sources and Datis, is that, you know, the amount of hormones that are necessary for the body to act right is very, very small. I think one person I read said it's the amount of adhesive on a postage stamp that a woman needs as far as estrogen levels, you know, throughout her life. And I thought, wow, that's not very much. So that's another, I've heard that more than one time, and that's another reason, like, I'm against just bombarding the body with hormones, because I think that you're causing more problems than you're actually fixing. So just remember that. In Hal Huggins' book, What Makes Your Hormones Hum, I have it right in front of me. There's also a reference to proper phosphorus levels. So you want definitely it to be close to 4 mg% when you get a blood test. If you have low serum phosphorus, this can definitely cause a lot of problems with hormones. And so most doctors don't look at phosphorus levels having to do with hormones, but this is definitely a Dr. Melvin Page reference. And so he said, like for instance, one of the references says, Page used minute doses of testosterone to correct the low serum phosphorus levels in Genix. We're talking fractions of a milligram. The better correction he achieved, the less dental decay the person would have, and the better improvement they would see in degenerative or autoimmune diseases. That's like, I mean, this whole book actually could have been put on a slide, and this would have been a 5-hour presentation, because every paragraph has something in it that's like, oh my gosh, that's like, who talks about this? Like, nobody. And so phosphorus is a huge indicator. So if you have blood chemistry handy and you want to go back and look at what the phosphorus levels are, which is usually done in the CBC, see if it's 4, because if it's like 3.6, that's also an indication of progesterone, not progesterone, hormone deficiency. Fran saying, what test do you think I need? Been having, I don't know what that is, ion periods lasting about 3 to 4 weeks. Oh, long. So what test do you think I need having long periods lasting about 3 to 4 weeks? I would probably do the pure menopause, which is the second, the one that does 2 tests during a 30-day period. That's what I would do, because you're not in menopause, obviously, and that wouldn't be a regular cycling female. So I would do the pure menopause test. Gaia says, what products do you suggest to help with thyroid and with progesterone? With these two, I use a combination depending on your temperature. But with thyroid, I use thyroid glandular, but sometimes I use herbal thyroid support. If someone has an 8-panel thyroid, I like to see if they have inflammation causing thyroid problems, because then you work from an anti-inflammatory angle. So that is a kind of a depends question, Gaia. It's definitely something that each person is unique. Let's say generally I would use a thyroid glandular with a progesterone like cream, like I use NPC, progesterone cream. It's a natural cream, and I use a thyroid glandular that's from New Zealand bovine, and it's organic and all that stuff. That would be a general thing. But if someone's like barely low, I may not do that, or if it's a young person, I probably wouldn't do that. I'm talking about maybe someone over 50. I would do those two things together. But I would like go back to the symptoms and say, well, how many do you have? What's your temperature? You know, kind of look at the whole picture. I mean, I want you guys to be empowered to, you know, kind of self-diagnose, if I can say that word, like kind of self-determine what is your biggest imbalance. And then I would definitely try natural products first, like blue and black cohosh are great for helping the body to produce its own estrogen. Wild yam is very well known. So is chase tree berry and Vitex for helping your body produce its own progesterone. And maca is very good, at least for women, for supporting testosterone levels, because remember, it's very low levels that you need, not big levels. On men, maca may not be strong enough. I would probably go with like I use Apex's Testanex cream. It's definitely natural. It's not testosterone glandular, but it's like chrysin and some other things that help men produce their own testosterone. So I definitely go natural first, and then if you need more support, then go into more of the glandulars or possibly even compounded stuff. Does anyone else, I think Teresa might have her hand up. Let me see if she has a mic. Teresa, can you hear me? Teresa?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello? I don't know if I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I didn't really have a question. I just sent you a thank you.
Oh, thank you. Okay. I just thought I'll read it. Okay, thanks.
Okay, I didn't know my computer had a microphone.
Okay, no, it does. So I can hear you. Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay.
Okay, so Teresa says she's happy to learn in such a good, efficient manner. Otherwise, I would not be able, so thank you very much. You're welcome. All right, so I don't have, the website I have is on the technology I use for the scan, and it's newvisionusa.com. I'll bring up that website maybe in a second, and you can learn more about the scans I do, or more of my biography and all that is on newvisionusa.com, NUVISION.com. I'll put it up last after I stop the recording, and you guys can go to that website if you want to learn more about what I do. Chantel says that was awesome. Can't wait for next month. So just a reminder, and then I'll just finish this up on the slides. If you have any more comments, that's great. So next month is, like I said, brain and sleep. We'll spend 2 hours going into that, again, like I said, in great detail, like tonight, similar format to this month and last month. And then upcoming in March is Hannah 1, which is, these are my weekend classes I'm offering this year and the dates. If you have questions about any of the classes and you did not get their emails with all the details, then you can also call Carol Culver, who's doing the webinars with me. Not the Tuesday night free ones, but the weekend webinars. And these are just like a ton of information. The 7 Physical Causes of Ill Health, which is my very favorite class to teach because it's Hannah Kroger's work. The Hannah 2 Intermediate, which is specific conditions, Hannah's tips, protocols, and doing long distance work to help people, like energy work. That's April 29th to May 1st. And then Access HANA is how to use the technology I use to get use of the system for a weekend, and to go through and do scans and learn how to integrate the Hannah Kroger information with our technology. I'm the owner of New Vision, the technology, which is a worldwide software. And then October 19th to 23rd is the emotional intensive. This is a live hands-on class in Houston. Also learning Hannah's hands-on work that we can't really teach in a webinar. That class is going to be awesome and life-changing for people because of the emotional aspects of the class. And then this is my contact information with a blurry picture, it looks like. If you want to contact me, my email and my phone number are right here. So if you have any other last questions, I'll be happy to take them. And I finished like about 2 minutes late, so not terrible. So if you want to write down my contact information, which is also like in every email, so it's also down at the bottom of each slide. So if you want to contact me for some reason, please do. And then I'm just going to put this up on the screen and leave it for a second. The New Vision website. So if you're interested in the technology or any other background or stuff on me, go here, newvisionusa.com. And there's a demo and some information on how things work. Okay, so Fran asked a question, do you have to take HANA 1 to do the Access HANA? You do not, but it would make a lot of sense when you're doing the interpretation, because this class is very interactive, that Access HANA class, and if you haven't taken, you don't have to take HANA 2, but if you haven't taken HANA 1 and you see something like a certain mineral deficiency or a certain parasite, I don't know that you would know what to do with the information. Like, because the class is, yes, to teach you about the interpretation, but not like line item by line item. It's more to look at a person as a whole compared to dowsing the body. So that's a great question, but I would definitely recommend HANA 1 at least before Access HANA. And all the classes are also recorded, just so you know. If you decide to take one of my webinars, there's a few benefits. One is it's recorded. You get the link afterwards. You can listen to it 10 times if you ever wanted to do that for some reason. And also, you can audit the classes for free. So if you take HANA 1 with me this year and you want to take it in 2 years as a refresher, then you can take the class again at no charge. And that's something I've been doing like forever. So it's 9:03 now in Houston, and no one sent another question. I really respect you guys' time. We tried to start on time, so I'm going to go ahead and